A while ago, Starbreeze put out a blog post as an update for Operation Medic Bag, in which they showcased the new armor type coming to Payday 3, the Adaptive Armour lining. The Adaptive Armour is a very different type of armor compared to what we already have in Payday 3. As the 4 armor types currently stand, they work in a pretty straightforward manner. When you take damage, you'll take a small amount of damage up front, and there'll be a bit of it that's able to be regenerated. If you take enough damage, you'll break a chunk and then move on to your next chunk of armor. The armors vary in the amount of chunks you have, and in tandem, the total amount of armor you have. The bulkier armors have longer armor regeneration times, slower movement speed, as well as giving you a fewer amount of times you can go down before you go into custody. The Adaptive Armour shakes this formula up, when instead of permanently losing armor in the chunk, you can instead regenerate all of the damage you take to the chunk, granted you don't fully break it. Oh, and the armor bar is also purple, for some reason. This is a pretty big change to how the armor system works, and by extension, how Payday 3 even plays as a game. I have a lot of issues with the upcoming addition of the Adaptive Armour to Payday 3, and before you go into the comments and tell me it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread and I shouldn't be complaining about it, just hear me out, okay? My main issue with the Adaptive Armour is that, like the title says, it comes across as Starbreeze backpedaling on the current armor system rather than a new addition to add on top of the already existing armor system. I see this for a couple of reasons, the largest one being that the Adaptive Armour pretty obviously exists purely because of the criticisms the armor system has gotten. It should be fairly obvious to anyone who's played, or even anyone who's been vaguely paying attention to Payday 3, that armor bags are undeniably the meta. Armor bags don't really have too much usage, especially with ammo drops no longer being limited to only one person, and weapons picking up a pretty generous amount of ammo per drop. Sentry guns are sentry guns and do have a place, albeit very nichely with a decently heavy point investment to go alongside it. Medic bags are solid, but unfortunately just pale in comparison to how useful armor bags are. After all, why use a deployable to restore health when you can use a deployable to restore your armor before it breaks and you actually start to take health damage? There have been some adjustments made since launch to make people less reliant on armor bags, those as dropping armor repair kits, arcs, techies dropping arcs, trading hostages dropping arcs, and buffs the amount of resources that hostages can drop when they're traded. There's also the changes made to the soft asset skill, letting you regenerate your current armor chunk if you shove away a human shield while you have rush active. However, we aren't quite there yet. There are still some changes left, you guessed it, on the table. The additions in on the table limbo are all fairly good in my eyes, such as being able to carry a first aid kit or armor repair kit in your pocket and be able to use it without having to physically go out to where the first aid kit or the armor repair kit is. That one seems to be a pretty big game changer, as it lets you play a lot more aggressively with your armor as you don't have to worry about where you're situated in comparison to where the armor repair kits are on the map. There's also the upcoming Clean Slate skill, letting you use armor repair kits to give you a chunk of armor if you have no armor left. But the key thing to note is that none of this fundamentally changes how armor works in Payday 3. No matter which way you look at it, armor just works differently than it does in Payday the Heist and Payday 2. This of course has led to a lot of people who enjoyed the armor system in the 2 games to criticize it, and in many cases, just flat out not play the game because of it. Because of this, it shouldn't really take a genius to figure out that this is Starbreeze's method of trying to appease these players, adding this new regenerating armor type to try and bring in the players, with the more Payday the Heist and Payday 2 styled armor. I think this is horribly flawed, and it misunderstands the game's own design philosophy to an absurd degree. Because of this though, I have a lot to say about it. About it misunderstanding the game's own design philosophy, the Adaptive Armour is going to change how the armor system plays, and by extension, how Payday 3 itself plays as a game. A lot of Payday 3 is designed around the war of attrition. In a heist, the cops are going to slowly whittle you down, and eventually you're going to run out of armor and health. The solution to this, of course, is to play quick and clean, reducing the amount of time you spend on the heist, and by extension, the amount of times you take damage. Because of this, bad positioning and not understanding how to do objectives efficiently are your worst enemies in Overkill, arguably more than the police themselves. Now this is pretty evident in how armor currently works. When you get shot and you regenerate the damage, you still have permanently taken some damage. Even though you fully recover from the shot, you haven't gone off scot-free. Then, here comes the Adaptive Armour, completely flipping that design philosophy on its head. It doesn't matter if you get shot, if you just wait a few seconds, you're going to be as good as new. Because of this, the Adaptive Armour will just be the best armor type in the game when it comes out. Just by virtue of being able to bypass being whittled down slowly like you would on the normal armor types, it's just gonna be the best. And then you have some issues with how it's gonna be without even comparing it to the other armor types, most notably with how it could possibly interact with some skills. Of course, I do get that it's a bit of a moot point to be talking about how the Adaptive Armour could be bad because of certain skills, but it's not like Starbreeze have ever made mistakes when implementing new additions to the game. The big one is how the Adaptive Armour will interact with PLup. With PLup, as long as you have grit and make an ammo pickup, you will instantly regenerate the armor in your chunk that is pending to be regenerated. This works pretty fine and dandy on the normal armor types, but on the adaptive armor though, since all of your armor is pending to be regenerated, you'll just be able to regenerate the entire chunk all at once. Now, what will most likely happen is that when they release the adaptive armor, they'll adjust the skill, add a little thing saying that it doesn't apply to the adaptive armor, or something like that. But it's never too much out of the realm of possibility that Starbreeze don't take into consideration how the skills will interact with the adaptive armor. Then there's Armor Up. While it's not going to be as game-breaking as PLup could be, it'll become a skill that you have actually zero need to pick up, since you can always regenerate that full armor chunk, and it'll save you a point in that regard. A similar thing could happen with armor repair kits too. They'd be useless on an armor type that can regenerate its chunk at any given time. Well, unless you use the clean slate skill when it drops, but I imagine the amount of times that you'll lose a chunk, much less all of your chunks, to be very slim. The adaptive armor's balancing is also questionable. In order to try, and the key word here is very much try, they've given it some drawbacks. On the adaptive armor, you'll only have 2 downs, like you would on 3 and 4 chunk armor, as well as taking increased damage, going from the traditional armor's 25% damage reduction to just a 5% damage reduction. While these are fairly reasonable nerfs to have, I think it comes out of a place of misunderstanding of why the adaptive armor is going to be so good. With the adaptive armor being able to basically just tank infinite shots if you let it regenerate, it's still gonna blow every other armor type out of the water by default. You know, why take an armor type that's eventually gonna get slowly whittled down when you can take this armor type that can't? This of course is going to lead to some power creep. For some players, overkill isn't too hard, and with the adaptive armor's addition, it's going to be a lot less challenging, as you'll be able to survive for much longer without needing to use armor backs, and with higher difficulties already being teased for Payday 3, it just leaves a poor taste in my mouth. Now, I'm going to go back to my main point about all this, and that the adaptive armor is Starbreeze backpedaling. Instead of trying to fix the armor system as it currently stands, they're instead going to add this new armor type that's flawed from a balance perspective and even goes against the game's own design philosophy. So, if I know so much about game design and why the adaptive armor is going to be such a bad addition, how would I make it a good fit for Payday 3? Well, it may be a little bit of an anticlimactic answer, but don't add it and instead focus on actually fixing the existing armor system. If you've been paying attention to the video with due diligence, you'll know that a lot of my criticisms of the adaptive armor stem from the fact that it's pretty much just a plaster fix for a system that they haven't really tried to fix. Instead, my proposition here is to make a small but incredibly game-changing adjustment to how armor works. Instead of taking permanent damage up front from a shot, all of the damage you take from a shot can be regenerated. However, when you get shot again, be it from the same cop or another cop, the permanent damage you would have taken up front from that first shot gets dealt, and then it continues, so on and so forth. I'm going to assume that I phrased this in a way that might be slightly confusing to understand, so I've got a little bit of a diagram to go along with it. As hypocritical as it might be coming from me, as it does go against the game's design philosophy of slowly being whittled down, I believe that this would be the best middle ground of the game's current armor system and the future edition of the adaptive armor. You're still going to be able to be slowly whittled down if you get shot multiple times, but if you only get hit once, you can regenerate all of it, and you aren't punished as hard for small mistakes. Of course, this might not be an absolutely perfect solution. Off the top of my head, I think this could actually nullify some of the risk of fighting dozers, but given that they fire automatic shotguns and deal a ton of damage, it's still not too far out of the question that you'll get absolutely wrecked by them if you play carefully. But I can still see some issues arising because of my idea. I think the adaptive armor just links back to a general issue that Payday 3 has. Starbreeze are unable to stick fully with their own original visions for the game, or be able to commit fully to changing the game. I'll reiterate it again just to be clear with it. My issue with the adaptive armor isn't really as much that it's unbalanced, but instead more that it's coming as a quick fix to a system that they haven't really put too much effort into fixing. They haven't really tried too much to make the armor system more forgiving and making armor bags less dominant, and instead have already effectively taken the nuclear option by adding an armor type that just forgoes the system, and is very obviously going to be dominating the game's meta with how haphazardly it's been designed, and will potentially be implemented. That just about covers it though. The adaptive armor is an addition I'm just not happy to see being added to Payday 3. Of all the things that the game needs at the moment, giving up on the armor system before they've tried to fix it is definitely not one of them. I think this is a misprioritization on Starbreeze's part, as well as being a massive mistake from a design perspective. I really hope that the rest of Operation Medic Bag is going to be good, because as it's been going so far, it's definitely left a lot to be desired. The addition of DX12 and the changes to how assaults bump up in difficulty midway through a wave are good, but, you know, no updates since syntax error and this is what we get? I don't know. As usual though, I've been Cookie Dough, and have a good one.